Hello and welcome to this end-to-end demo featuring inner loop development cycle with Odoo. Before I begin talking about Odoo, I would like to talk about two things. The first one being what is an inner loop development cycle? It simply is the initial phase of an application development cycle where you continuously code, build, and test your application until it is ready to move to production or staging. The second thing is about an application developer who is working on a project which, once ready for production, will be deployed to a cloud native environment such as OpenShift or Kubernetes. This developer would like to run their inner loop in a production like environment, but finds it difficult to do so because of the complexities and steep learning curve involved in running an application in such an environment. This is where Odoo comes in. With the help of Odoo and DevFile, this developer can run their application uh, in a cluster with two simple commands. What a DevFile is, we'll talk about in a bit. Before we begin with our demo, we'll need to install the Odoo binary. The installation instruction for all the standard operating system is available on odoo.dev website. In my case, I already have Odoo installed, so I'm going to skip that step. I have a simple Go project here, which is a ping pong application, and I would like to run this application on the cluster. I'm going to use a local minikube cluster. Let's check the status of this cluster before we move on. It is running, so that's good. Now, Odoo uses devfile to understand the environment it should set up for your cluster. Uh, Since we do not have a dev file yet, we will run Odoo init command to download the appropriate dev file from the dev file registry. We'll run Odoo init. Now it will analyze your source code and determine the suitable dev file for you. In this case, it says Go, which is correct. It downloads Go from the default dev file registry that we have set in our system. There is one container component inside this dev file. It exposes port 8080, which is fine for us because that is the port that our application is using. So we'll skip the configuration part. We'll name this to demo go. We see that it has downloaded the dev file for us. So let's take a look at the dev file before we move on. Now, dev file is an open standard definition for defining your development environment as code. DevFile can help us define the components required to run our application on the cluster and the commands that should be run to build and test it. And those are the two important things that we will take a look at in this dev file. Since we are going to work in a cloud native environment, our application will essentially run inside a container. So we have defined a container component here. It's called runtime. uh, it's going to use this particular image. You can define the memory limit you want to impose on this container. You can define the endpoints that it can expose. The second thing is this commands. You can define the build command and the run command for your application. Both of these commands will be executed inside the container component. There's also information such as metadata, schema version, and starter project available about your dev file, but we don't need to bother with that right now. So before we start to run our application on the cluster, we'll first need to create a namespace inside which all the resources will be created. So let's do that. Now that the namespace has been created, we'll run Odoo dev and see our application deploy on the cluster. So Odoo will first create all the necessary Kubernetes resources. Once they are created, Odoo will sync the files from your local system to your remote system, and it will build and run your application. This application is now accessible on port 127, this one. So if we call ping, we are given pong. Now, Odoo will continuously watch this directory for any changes. So anytime I make change to my application, it will be automatically synced with the cluster and the application will be built again. Odoo will also monitor the resources that it has created. So in case any of the resource goes down, it will recreate them or and make sure that your application is running. So I want to extend my application a bit. I want it to become more than a ping pong application. I want it to print custom hello message whenever user pings it. So I'm going to modify my main.go file to do just that. So As soon as I hit save, Odoo, it detected changes in my main.go file and it will sync the files again to my cluster and rebuild the application. So if I hit the curl command again, it says hello ping. And if I say hello Parthvi, it says hello Parthvi. So our application is running. Now, you can also run Odoo list component to know all the components that are currently running on your cluster. This component, since it's an inner loop development cycle, we say that it's running in the dev mode and it is managed by Odoo. You can also run Odoo describe component from your project directory and get information about the components itself. Now that I'm satisfied with my inner loop development cycle, I'm going to hit Control C, which will delete all the resources that were created by Odoo. So this is what Odoo is, a fast and iterative CLI tool for application developers to run their inner loop development cycle in a cloud native environment without the hassles and complexities. So you can visit odoo.dev website to know more about Odoo. That's all for today's demo. Thank you very much.